Number 7. Fabio De Lelo. Italian woman Roberta Smagiassi, aged 33, was killed in a traffic accident in the summer of 2016, in which an oblivious motorist ran a red light and consequently plowed into her while she was riding a moped. In the tragic incident's aftermath, the victim's husband, 34-year-old banker and semi-professional footballer Fabio De Lelo, waged a vendetta against the individual responsible for his wife's premature demise. The embittered widower tracked down the driver, named as Italo De Lisa, to a cafe in the Abruzzo commune of Vasto in early 2017. Then De Lelo, armed with a handgun, walked right up to 22-year-old De Lisa and gunned him down while he sat outside the restaurant. Shortly thereafter, the man walked to the cemetery where his wife had been buried and placed the gun on her gravestone. He then went to the police station to turn himself in. Prior to carrying out the vengeful shooting, De Lelo had reportedly changed his Facebook profile picture to a screenshot from the 2000 film Gladiator. The specific photograph De Lelo chose came from the scene in which Russell Crowe, portraying the character Maximus, delivered the famous line, "Father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next." During the case's court proceedings, the defense team argued that although De Lisa had been charged with manslaughter in connection to the fatal vehicle crash, De Lelo feared that he wouldn't be properly brought to justice and thus took the law into his own hands. Prosecutors labeled the shooting a tragedy within a tragedy and called for De Lelo to be sent to prison for the rest of his life. In March of 2017, however, the man was ultimately sentenced to 30 years in prison. Number 6. Obina Izuke. In the early morning hours of September the 15th of 2016, confessed drug dealer Obina Izuke snuck into a North London residence belonging to 53-year-old Annie Ikofo. It was subsequently reported that Izuke had been involved in a long-running feud with another member of Ikofo's family. However, in a tragic instance of mistaken identity, the mother of 9 and her nephew, Bervul Kalikaka Ikofo, were fatally shot by Izuke, who then fled the scene in a black Vauxhall Mariva. The career criminal ultimately faced criminal charges in connection to the double murder and, after standing trial 5 separate times, was finally convicted in October of 2020. Although Izuke outright denied having any involvement in the Ikofo's killings, the police reportedly reviewed CCTV footage in which he was shown fleeing the scene of the crime in the vehicle registered to him. Following his conviction, Izuke was sentenced to a minimum of 40 years in prison. Number 5. Elta and Libra Cherry. At about 11:45 a.m. on Easter Sunday 2017, 46-year-old Elta and her daughter, Libra Cherry, went to the Parkway Place apartments in Louisville, Kentucky, to confront 2 women with whom they were involved in an unspecified feud. In the resulting arrest report, it was detailed how Moore and Cherry became engaged in a physical altercation with their 2 rivals. 29-year-old Cherry allegedly used a baseball bat to damage one of the women's vehicles before turning the weapon on the woman herself. During the course of the incident, the other woman, later identified as Tania Woods, was fatally shot by Moore, according to police records. After being beaten with Cherry's bat, Tayela Love also sustained a non-fatal gunshot wound to the stomach, for which she was later treated at University of Louisville Hospital. Although initial reports on the matter suggested that Moore and Cherry had been the instigators of the cold-blooded attack, and they were charged with murder and assault accordingly. However, when the case eventually went to trial, it was concluded that the mother and daughter had actually been acting in self-defense during the double shooting, and they were therefore acquitted of the criminal charges in February of 2019. Number 4. Anthony Lorenzo. A young couple was dragged from their car and gunned down following a traffic dispute during the Puerto Rican Day Parade in Chicago, Illinois on June the 19th of 2021. According to local authorities, Giovanni Azuega, aged 24, and his girlfriend of many years, 25-year-old Yasmin Perez, had been driving through the city's Humboldt Park neighborhood when they were involved in what was described as a minor traffic accident. Immediately following the seemingly inconsequential fender bender, a group of men encircled the couple's vehicle and began to unleash a barrage of punches and kicks. Shortly thereafter, as was captured on video by a nearby witness, the assailants opened the car doors and forcibly removed Izuke from inside before unleashing a brutal attack on him in the middle of the street. The group assault, which was allegedly meant as a form of retaliation against the couple for the accident, was eventually interrupted by convicted felon and Latin king Anthony Lorenzo. Although he hadn't been involved in the initial conflict, Lorenzo reportedly inserted himself into the altercation at some point. During the ensuing physical struggle, Perez rushed to defend her boyfriend and was consequently shot in the neck. It was later detailed how it had been deemed more than likely that the woman had accidentally been shot by Izuke, who'd brandished a firearm in an attempt to ward off his attackers. The incident culminated with Lorenzo fatally shooting Izuke in the head. Perez ultimately passed away at the hospital a couple of days later. In the wake of the shooting, Lorenzo fled the state, but was eventually located in California and arrested by U.S. Marshals, who then relinquished him to Cook County law enforcement. Lorenzo, whose criminal track record includes 26 past arrests, was held in custody without bond while awaiting his case's court proceedings. Number 3. Stephen Ruth. Long Island resident Stephen Ruth was taken into police custody after he was accused of intentionally damaging 19 traffic light cameras in Brookhaven in April of 2016. In subsequent reports, it was described how the 42-year-old had developed a vendetta against red light cameras and had thus made it his personal mission to tamper with as many of them as he could. Ruth allegedly snipped the wires to the cameras and knocked some of them off kilter so all they would record was the sky. New York officials also accused him of cutting down a red light camera pole on Old Town Road in Coram on January the 18th. The total cost of the damage Ruth caused was estimated to be roughly $25,000. On the night of April the 12th, NYPD officers tailed the man to his Center Reach residence and arrested him on felony criminal mischief charges. Although Ruth faced the potential of spending up to 7 years behind bars for the offense, he ultimately reached a plea deal with prosecutors which sentenced him to 1 year of probation in lieu of jail time. Ruth initially rose to national prominence in 2015 when he publicly announced his crusade against Long Island's red light camera system, which automatically sends traffic tickets to anyone who runs a red light. He claimed that the city had shortened the duration of yellow lights to force more motorists to run through red lights, resulting in increased traffic tickets. Ruth further argued that the traffic light cameras set up throughout Long Island were illegal because they'd never been approved by licensed engineers.
See what I just did? All it took was a pair of balls and a painter's extension rod. I just saved people about $10,000 today with this camera.
Today's topic was requested by Old Man Kizuki. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Teo Wesley. West London man Teo Wesley was embroiled in an intense personal feud with Tony Charlery for the better part of 15 years, as was detailed in subsequent reports on the matter. Wesley had believed Charlery to have been responsible for the 1999 death of his sister, Bolaji, and had thus held an intractable grudge against him. Bolaji, who'd been living with Charlery in Earl's Court at the time, had plummeted to her death after falling out of a third-story window. In 2002, Charlery was brought to trial in connection to the deadly incident, but was ultimately acquitted of any criminal wrongdoing by a jury at the Old Bailey, a decision which infuriated Wesley. 2 years later, the latter reportedly attacked Charlery with an iron bar outside his home, for which he was charged with causing grievous bodily harm with intent. Although Wesley was later cleared of the charges, investigators indicated that he'd openly admitted to carrying out the attack against his rival. Wesley's personal vendetta came to a violent culmination in August of 2014 when he reportedly encountered 59-year-old Charlery in Notting Hill and proceeded to fatally stab him in the neck. The man was subsequently taken into police custody in connection to the revenge killing. During the case's eventual trial, Wesley contended that he hadn't originally intended to kill Charlery, but that upon seeing him on the day of the deadly altercation, He'd been overcome with rage and consequently lost control of his actions. He ultimately pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 21 years behind bars. Number 1. Travis Satterwhite. A gang leader from Bridgeport, Connecticut, pursued a personal vendetta against the man whom he believed to have targeted him during a shootout in the summer of 1998. The feud reportedly originated on August the 10th of that year when Travis Satterwhite exited the Golden Hill Street courthouse after attending a hearing. The man was met with a barrage of gunfire but was able to duck back inside the building before sustaining any injuries. It subsequently emerged that 21-year-old Dante Jones, a UPS worker from Stratford, had been gunned down during the incident in which he had no personal involvement. Satterwhite blamed the shooting on a member of the city's foundation gang named Jermaine Baby Boy Reese. The latter stood trial for Jones's murder in 1999, but the jury assigned to his case found him not guilty, indicating that he hadn't been the one to launch the attack on Satterwhite either. Despite the verdict handed down in Connecticut Superior Court, Satterwhite refused to give up his fixation on Reese, whom he still blamed for his attempted murder. The gangster held on to his grudge for 7 years, before finally taking retaliatory action in December of 2006. On the 27th of that month, Satterwhite tracked his rival down to an East End street corner and fired upwards of 40 fatal rounds into his head, torso, and extremities. During the case's eventual court proceedings, Satterwhite pleaded guilty to reduced charges of conspiracy to commit murder and was sentenced to 7 years in prison, followed by 10 years of special parole. Reese's family publicly decried the man's sentencing, which they considered astonishingly lenient, given the extremely violent and purposeful nature of the shooting. Thanks for watching. Would you rather let go of a personal grudge against your worst enemy or be forced to get rid of your favorite childhood toys? Let us know in the comments section below.